They arrived in orbit like gods descending from Olympus, sleek silver vessels shaped like daggers and stars, moving with the grace of entities untouched by war or entropy. The Galactic Council had finally responded to Earth's signal flare, the long, desperate cry into the cosmic dark that humanity had been broadcasting for decades. We thought it was a sign of hope. We believed we were being welcomed. We were wrong. It started with the arrival. The great ships hovering over Geneva, Delhi, New York, and Nairobi. They didn't speak in thunder. They didn't fire weapons. They came cloaked in light and diplomacy, cloistered behind shimmering energy fields, escorted by drone swarms that sang in harmonic tones to calm the senses. They looked like angels. Some even had wings, synthetic appendages that glistened in Earth's atmosphere as a show of aesthetic culture. To them, everything was a performance of superiority. Their representative, a tall, luminescent being of the Sarathi species, introduced herself with perfect translated eloquence. Her name was Zyril. Her voice was soft as wind over water, but her words cut deeper than any blade. "You have potential," she said, standing in front of the United Nations as 1,000 world leaders watched from their seats, and billions tuned in across the globe. "But potential is not power, potential is not wisdom. You, as a species, remain bound by chaos, by violence, by myth." There was a long silence. Cameras zoomed in on the UN secretary, general's clenched jaw. Others squirmed in their seats, and Zyril continued. "We are the enlightened races. We have eliminated war, scarcity, inequality. We do not kill. We do not punish. We do not believe in your gods, your demons, your vengeance fantasies. We do not need them. Our societies are optimized, post-emotive, beyond primal." She smiled gently, almost pityingly. "You still believe in hell." Murmurs spread across the chamber. Zyril wasn't finished. "Your species created entire religions based on punishment. You threatened generations with eternal torment in fire to control their behavior. You slaughtered in the name of invisible judges. You built moral systems on fear. You glorified death as a gateway to paradise or damnation. And yet," she said, raising a slender finger, "your planet is dying. Your skies are choking. Your nations still threaten each other with extinction. You have not evolved. You are animals who dream of ethics." One of the human ambassadors, a retired general from Nigeria, rose to speak. "You came here to lecture us." Zyril didn't flinch. "We came here to assess and to inform you. Earth is denied entrance into the Galactic Council." A gasp swept the room. Some shouted. Others stared blankly, as if their greatest hope had been executed in real time. "You are not ready," Zyril concluded. "When you no longer need the concept of hell to maintain order, when you transcend the savage binary of punishment and reward, only then may you stand among the enlightened." And with that, she and her delegation left. No negotiation, no chance for appeal. The council ships departed within the hour, vanishing back into the stars, leaving behind stunned silence, bitter headlines, and a deep, seething fury that would not fade. In the following weeks, Earth fell into a collective stupor of rage and reflection. Memes exploded, protests erupted, the term primitive became a brand, first of shame, then of defiance. But somewhere, in a dark conference room beneath the mountains of Colorado, a handful of minds began to meet in secret. Soldiers, scientists, ethicists, AI programmers, the ones who had heard what Zyril said most clearly. The ones who understood the true insult. They weren't just calling us undeveloped. They were saying we lacked the will to bring consequence to evil. And so began the first whisper of a new philosophy. A question posed not with spite, but with cold, ruthless intent. What if hell wasn't a myth? They left us in the ashes of our hope. For a time, Earth wallowed. Some clung to the insult like a wound they couldn't stop picking at. Others tried to forget. to convince themselves it was a blessing to be left alone. But for a small group, the ones who had seen war, who had faced the worst of humanity and survived, it wasn't rejection they felt. It was revelation. In a decommissioned missile silo deep beneath the Colorado Rockies, behind biometric locks and layers of black, budget authorization, Project Tartarus was born. Its founding document was not a military directive or a political agenda. It was a single handwritten line scrawled by Dr. Miriam Rourke, former DARPA psychologist and behavioral architect. If morality without consequence is evolution, then evolution has no teeth. The first members of Tartarus were not politicians. They were people who had seen the edge, Black Ops commanders who'd interrogated warlords, neuroscientists who mapped fear, coders who had written AI that could learn, adapt, and simulate human consciousness to the atom. They gathered in secret not to build weapons, but to build consequence. What if, Rourke asked, pacing before a holographic display of neural pain receptors, we stop trying to evolve past punishment, and instead perfect it? No one answered at first, because they understood what she was proposing. Not just justice, not revenge, hell, not a religious fantasy, not fire and brimstone. Something far worse, something real. An engineered system of retribution designed to do what courts, prisons, and ethics had failed to do for centuries: impose unrelenting, tailored accountability on the wicked. They began designing simulations that could map a person's mind down to their deepest fears. Using invasive scans, they could recreate an individual's guilt, memory, shame, and feed it back in looping fractals, creating psychological torment with surgical precision. But Tartarus wasn't just about pain. Pain was too crude. They wanted meaningful suffering, a form of psychological echo chamber that made the condemned confront the moral weight of their actions over and over again, in personalized digital hellscapes that adjusted in real time. A soldier who bombed a village would live as every victim. A warlord would see their empire collapse again and again from every angle. A tyrant would become the oppressed over and over. They created learning AI to design these hells procedurally, adapting to the mental defenses of the subject. They could not die. They could not escape. They could not forget. Some within the team questioned the ethics. Are we any better than the monsters we punish? Rourke looked them in the eye and said, "We don't do this because we're better. We do it because no one else is willing to do what must be done." Outside the silo, the world moved on, but whispers began to circulate in the intelligence community. Foreign satellites tracked unexplained energy readings in Colorado. Ethics boards were silenced. Data leaks vanished. The project stayed in the shadows until the stars came calling again. A minor race known as the Draken raided an off-world mining colony, a peaceful Earth outpost on Europa Roman II. They assumed humanity was still primitive, still soft. They were wrong. For the first time, Tartarus Protocol was activated. Captured Draken warriors were not imprisoned. They were scanned, analyzed, and uploaded. Not a single death sentence, no physical harm, just hell. Within 3 standard days, the Draken surrendered. Not just the raiders, all of them. Their leaders sent a message to Earth in trembling binary: "We choose exile over your justice." The galaxy took notice. Zyril and her council had said that Earth was still chained by myth. What they hadn't understood was this: hell is not superstition. Hell is a technology, and humanity had just become its architect. It began with static, a garbled distress signal from Europa Roman II, one of Earth's proudest off-world colonies, a marvel of subterranean engineering beneath the ice crust of Jupiter's moon. Over 12,000 civilians lived and worked there, building a new future for humanity among the stars. Then came silence. The Draken had attacked without warning, slaughtered the outer defenses in minutes with advanced kinetic drills and molecular disassemblers. They weren't a major power. They weren't even part of the Galactic Council. But they were pirates with fast ships, cloaking tech, and the kind of arrogance that came from watching humanity be humiliated on a galactic stage. They thought Earth was soft, naive, primitive. The Council had said. They didn't know about Tartarus, not yet. When the images came through, the ruined corridors, the blood, frozen bodies, the broken faces. President Os, I didn't go to the press. She didn't call for vengeance. She issued a single private order to a division of Earth's Orbital Command, initiate Tartarus Protocol. The recovery team arrived in silence, a small fleet of stealth cruisers painted blacker than space. No fanfare, no warning. They tracked the Draken raiders to a barren moon in the Zyrth Belt, where they were hiding among old mining stations and smugglers' ports. They could have bombed them, vaporized the entire surface. But that wasn't the point. Instead, the human strike force captured the Malev. All 30, 2 Draken warriors were transported to a containment vessel known only as the Anvil, a mobile black site run by Tartarus Command. There, they were sedated, scanned, and uploaded into the system's neural lattice. What happened next was never shown to the public, but whispers leaked from janitors who worked on server cores, from engineers who maintained the sensory inputs, from AI overseers who asked strange questions like, what would make a warlord weep for mercy? The simulations varied. One Draken, known for impaling human miners, was forced to relive the final moments of each victim through their own terrified eyes in an endless loop. Another, who had torched a family's oxygen shelter, was placed in a world where he had to watch his own kin die by the same suffocation, again and again, while unable to intervene. Time was distorted. An hour in real space could stretch into weeks of simulated experience. Each torment was custom, built to reflect not just pain, but moral clarity, and it worked. Within days, the surviving Draken commanders begged for release. Not from captivity, from consciousness itself. They offered military codes, black market networks, even council secret. Anything to be removed from Tartarus, but none were executed. They were simply left. Inside, one Draken escaped, not physically. He was released intentionally, uploaded back into a cloned body and sent home. He returned a shell of what he was, eyes sunken, voice trembling. In a public square, he screamed to his people, "They've made a godless prison, a place where your sins learn your name and burn you from the inside out." The Draken surrendered, not just the raiding party. Their entire nation. They sent reparations, they offered ships, they requested an Earth ambassador, they even tried to join Earth's justice system just to stay on humanity's good side. The Galactic Council was stunned. This wasn't warfare, it was domination, moral domination. When the Council demanded to know what had happened, Earth's ambassador simply said, "We gave them what your enlightened society never could, accountability." And for the first time in centuries, the galaxy trembled. Not from a superweapon, not from a death fleet, but from the terrifying knowledge that humans had made punishment into science. They had invented hell, and now they were no longer seeking admission into the Council. They were preparing to judge it. They thought Tartarus would be a weapon. They were wrong. It became something far more dangerous. It became an idea. After the Draken capitulation, Earth didn't celebrate with parades or speeches. There was no victory ceremony. Instead, the human coalition sent out a quiet transmission across open galactic channels. A single phrase, "Justice is not peace, justice is consequence." And attached to that phrase, encrypted, secured behind quantum locks, was a white paper. Not a weapon schematic, a philosophy. It was called The Ethics of Constructed Suffering, written by Dr. Miriam Rourke and Co., signed by 11 of Earth's top ethicists. It outlined not only the principles of Tartarus, but the moral necessity of it. It framed hell not as punishment, but as education, not as vengeance, but balance, a mirror to the soul, where the guilty could no longer hide behind diplomacy or delusion. We do not torture, the paper stated. We reflect, we simulate, we recreate the gravity of pain so that those who wielded it must, finally, carry its full weight. The galaxy laughed at first. The Sarathi called it a primitive tantrum dressed in philosophy. The Calvari, a race of living crystal archivists, dismissed it as emotional recursion. The enlightened race's believed consequence was outdated, obsolete, but not everyone agreed. Small voices began to rise, first from the edges of galactic society. From the broken planets, the neglected colonies, the refugee moons where no council ships ever came. They had suffered in silence for generations. Slavers, crime syndicates, biological exploiters, all operating under the Council's doctrine of post-punitive ethics. Now they had an alternative. And more than that, a hope. One by one, systems began requesting access to Tartarus protocols, not the technology, just the philosophy, the framework, the algorithms that could simulate moral confrontation. Earth responded cautiously at first, then openly. Tartarus didn't become an empire, it became a gospel. There were whispers of underground courts run by former human judges, adjudicating alien war crimes in asteroid hideouts. Rumors of artificial hell shards installed aboard prison satellites, mall modules where criminals would spend mere seconds, but emerge changed forever. Entire crime syndicates collapsed when word spread that Earth would intervene if governments would not. Even scholars, at first skeptical, began to study it seriously. The Philosophers' Conclave on Aris Prime held a debate titled, "Does Consequence Require Pain?" The vote, 67% in favor, suddenly primitive, didn't sound like an insult. It sounded like foundation. Human cultural exports shifted with the wave, no longer just music or food or fashion. Now they sent books, films, simulations, immersive VR experiences that let alien citizens feel what Earth meant by justice. One such experience, titled Ashes and Mirrors, became the most distributed simulation in Council space within 6 months. It didn't glorify hell. It made you live as the victim, the perpetrator, and the judge, until lines blurred and understanding sharpened. It was banned in 6 systems. In 12 others, it became required education. Reporters from interstellar news nets interviewed Earth's ethicists. One asked Rourke, "Do you truly believe fear is the path to order?" She answered calmly, "Not fear, awareness. Hell is not about burning people. It's about stopping them from lighting the match again." Alien leaders began quoting human philosophers in council debates. The term constructive retribution became standard policy language in 10 systems, and Tartarus kept evolving. The AI systems grew more nuanced. New simulation branches explored not just punishment, but redemption. Some criminals emerged from Tartarus reformed, voluntarily entering service to rebuild what they had destroyed. And still, the Council resisted. Still, they mocked Earth behind closed doors, but their allies began drifting away. Because in the shadows of the stars, where law had no teeth, only Earth offered something the enlightened races had long forgotten how to give: consequences that meant something. And in time, the galaxy stopped laughing. They started listening. For centuries, the Sarathi were the shining face of the Galactic Council. They wore enlightenment like armor, serene, untouchable, revered across star systems as the oldest, wisest, most civilized species in known space. Their cities floated in orbit, crafted of translucent crystal and living light. Their government was made of scholars, poets, ethicists. They abolished war before humanity invented steam. They had no prisons, no police, no death penalty. To them, crime was a disease cured by education, and evil was merely a symptom of misunderstanding. When Earth was rejected, it was the Sarathi who stood at the podium, smiling, graceful, and condescending. They said we were too savage to join the stars, but they had a secret. For all their radiant ideals, the Sarathi had shadows, ones they refused to admit even existed. On the distant colony world of Sireland 6, the truth finally tore through the facade. It started as a whisper. A Sarathi whistleblower, a bioengineer named Kellyan, contacted an Earth diplomat in secret. His eyes were hollow, his skin paled by stress. His first words were not hello or please, but they buried them under glass. What followed was a data dump that crashed 2 secure Earth servers and sent every member of Tartarus Command into cold silence. For all their lectures on peace and enlightenment, the Sarathi had been harvesting undesirables. Not killing them, not jailing them, they were deleting them. Entire minds, criminals, dissidents, protesters, were uploaded into crystalline memory matrices under the guise of restorative cognitive preservation. Publicly, they claimed to be helping them heal. Privately, they rewrote them, scrubbed memories, altered personalities, turned real people into obedient husks, empty shells walking among the populace with dead smiles and nothing behind their eyes. They called it correctional sublimation. Humanity had another word, erasure. Tartarus Command debated whether to act. It would mean exposing the Council's shining jewel as a house of horrors. But the decision came quickly. Rourke stood before the Black Site Tribunal and said, "They erased minds to preserve utopia. We will burn their utopia to preserve truth." Earth didn't send a fleet. They sent a file, broadcast across every open channel in Council space. Videos, documents, testimonies, neural scan overlays, proof undeniable. The entire archive was wrapped in a final simulation file titled Glass Hell. It was the recorded consciousness of a Sarathi dissident forced into sublimation, now reconstructed inside a Tartarus, designed experience. The simulation showed their agony, the feeling of watching yourself forget who you were, your memories bleeding away like sand through glass. It ended with a phrase etched into their final thought: even death would be mercy. The fallout was immediate. The Council convened in emergency session. Protests erupted on Sarathi colonies. Other races, long skeptical of Sarathi supremacy, began rescinding alliances. The Sarathi Prime Council tried to defend their actions, calling it a higher form of justice. But the galaxy had a new frame of reference now. They had seen Tartarus. They had seen real consequence. The Sarathi were not punished by bombs or invasions. They were punished by truth. Their credibility collapsed. Trade froze. Their ships were denied docking privileges in 5 quadrants, and in an act of poetic irony, dozens of their own corrected. Citizens were smuggled out by human operatives and restored, given back their memories, their rage, their grief, and now they were testifying before a new tribunal, not council, sanctioned, not legal in their eyes. A tribunal held aboard an Earth carrier called Judicator, where Hell had a seat at the table, and judgment was human. The chamber was silent, not from peace, but from fear. Representatives of dozens of star systems, races who had once laughed behind polished teeth and porcelain diplomacy, now sat in a tribunal orbiting a dead moon, all of them watching a single figure step forward. She wore no robe of state, no armor, no ceremonial sigils, just a simple black suit with a silver pin shaped like a flame. Dr. Miriam Rourke, founder of Tartarus, humanity's judge. Her voice, when it came, wasn't angry. It didn't shout. It was quiet, measured, relentless, the way only a human voice can be when it carries the weight of every buried atrocity it has finally dug up. "When we came to you," she said, "we came with curiosity, with wonder, with the dream that the stars would be full of wisdom." "And what did you call us? Primitive." She let the word hang in the air like smoke. "You said we clung to violence, that we hadn't evolved beyond consequence, that punishment was a relic of a savage past." She looked out over the crowds, Isle of the Council, the now deposed Serathi Prime, Draken elders, Calvary scholars, all silent, all listening, but we saw what your enlightenment truly was. It was cowardice in a mask of peace. It was sterilized injustice, a civilization that forgot that some crimes should not be absorbed. They should be confronted. You erased memories instead of teaching accountability. You freed monsters in the name of progress. You chose ignorance over painful truth. We chose hell. The chamber stirred, but no one dared interrupt. We took your judgment and built something better, not because we are cruel, but because we understand that morality without consequence is fiction. You feared us because we remember what pain is, what suffering means, and we used it, not to enslave, not to dominate, but to teach the universe that evil has a cost. She raised her hand, and in that moment a hologram ignited in the chamber, one of the first Tartarus simulations ever created. It showed a Draken warlord, kneeling in virtual torment, watching as every victim he'd ever created stepped forward and spoke his name. Not screamed, spoke, with voices heavy with meaning. The simulation faded. Rourke lowered her hand. "We are not asking for a seat on your council. We are not asking for forgiveness. We are offering a choice." Her voice sharpened, not cruel, but crystalline. "Either you accept that justice must be earned through consequence, or we will make our own order among the stars, one where truth is not polished away by comfort, one where hell exists, not to torture the innocent, but to terrify the guilty." She stepped back. For a long moment, no one moved. Then a voice from the shadows, a young envoy from a fractured moon, state, trembling but defiant, stood and said, "I will speak for my people. We have known pain. We have known silence. We will stand with Earth." Another followed. Then another, dozens, and the old order began to fracture. Not by war, not by revolution, by truth. They had called Earth primitive, because Earth remembered pain, because Earth remembered that justice is not born in silence, but in fire. And when the stars forgot what consequence meant, it was humanity who reinvented hell, and through it reminded the galaxy, you do not evolve by escaping your sins, you evolve by facing them.